Cold moonlight fell on the well-trodden path, leading deep into the cemetery. Fallen leaves rustled quietly underfoot. In the silence of the night, two girls made their way through a long-abandoned cemetery. They were almost halfway through when one of them whined and pulled her companion's hand. "Rose, I don't like this. Let's go back." "We can't, remember," the girl whispered irritably. "There is a promise. There is a promise. We must do it." "But it was you who promised, not me," exclaimed the first. Rose stopped abruptly and looked at her companion. Fear and anger splashed in her eyes. She sharply pulled out the hand that her friend was clinging to and said, "If you don't want to come with me, then say so. I didn't ask you to tag along with me." She chuckled, turned around and walked on. Without looking back, Rose and Kira were ordinary high school students. On the morning of this day, Rose bet with her friends that she could go to the far end of the cemetery and return back, bringing something from there as a sign of proof of her courage. When Kira found out about this, she decided not to leave her friend and followed her. But both did not even imagine that this would not be easy to do. Now, walking along the path strewn with autumn leaves, Rose greatly regretted that she had not refused. But there was nothing left to do. "Rosa, wait." Kira's voice came from behind. "I won't leave you here alone." Without answering, Rose continued on her way. There was only a short distance left to go. "It'll all be over soon," Rose thought and walked faster. Suddenly something flashed in the darkness. Maybe a bird. The girl tried to calm herself down, hoping that her friend didn't see anything. But she hoped in vain. "Did you see this?" Kira squeaked in horror. "There's someone there. You're making it all up." "There's no one there," Rose said in despair, feeling a lump rising in her throat. "As you say," Kira whispered, clinging tighter to her friend's hand. Now the end of the cemetery appeared, where the dilapidated statue stood. "Let's run," Rosa shouted, unable to bear it, and rushed forward, dragging her friend along with her, just to get there faster. Unsuspecting Kira, she tripped and fell to the ground with a bang, hitting her knees and stomach painfully. "What are you doing?" the girl screamed. "It hurts me." Rose stopped for a second and, throwing, "Stay here. I'll be right there," rushed to the statue. Running up, she looked around. Something had to be done to prove it, but there was nothing around except withered leaves and broken pieces of the statue. What to do? The girl thought in panic. "We need to find something, otherwise they will never believe me." She kicked the leaves around, searching for the slightest evidence. Suddenly her gaze was caught by some kind of reflection among a pile of leaves at the very foot of the statue. Rose bent down and picked up the object. It turned out to be an old silver cross on a metal chain. "This will do," she decided, and quickly put the cross in her pocket. But Rose didn't have time to leave. She heard a rustling sound from behind and felt hot breath on her neck. "This is mine," a voice rasped behind her. "Give it to me." Horror gripped the girl, forcing her heart to beat at a breakneck speed. She wanted to scream, to run away, but the scream was stuck in her throat, and her legs refused to obey. With difficulty reaching for the small cross with trembling fingers, Rose tried with all her might not to fall. She handed it across, afraid to wrap it up. "Turn to me." The unknown man's voice became more intense, which made the hoarse sound even more terrifying. Her legs refused to obey her, which made her situation even more deplorable. "Turn around," the creature rasped again, and notes of irritation were heard in its voice. Tears welled up in the girl's eyes, but, gathering her courage, she turned around. Her eyes met his. It was something with a translucent body and veiled eyes. He looked at her silently for a while, stretching out his hand with torn sleeves. He placed it on the girl's head and his long, dirty nails clenched on her hair. "Give it back to me," the creature repeated. Rose extended a trembling hand, in which lay a cross. Tears of horror flowed down her cheeks, burning like hot wax. He looked at the cross and then back at the girl. A mocking grin appeared on his face, and the next second he pushed her so that she flew to the foot of the statue. Pain shot through her body, but before she had time to come to her senses, the creature was next to her and forcefully dug its dirty, broken nails into her hand. She screamed, but it immediately covered her mouth with its second hand. Trying to escape, Rosa desperately beat her arms and legs just to escape, and for a moment she almost succeeded. She jumped to her feet and was about to run away, but she didn't have time to dodge, and his hand fell heavily on her head. Her legs gave way, and darkness closed its arms. When Rose opened her eyes again, the creature was standing over her, and her body was in terrible convulsions. She tried to rise up on her elbow, but her body refused to obey her, and she fell. Realizing that his victim had come to his senses, her tormentor leaned towards her and inhaled the scent of her hair mixed with the smell of blood. He grabbed her roughly by the neck and slammed her into the statue again, causing her to gasp for air. I no longer had the strength to scream. I failed Kira, Rose thought before it sank its claws into her, causing her heart to stop forever. Having achieved its goal, the creature licked itself predatorily and pressed its rotten teeth to the neck of the dead girl. And again, there was silence, interrupted only by occasional squelching and contented snoring. When it was all over, it broke away from the body and several scarlet drops fell to the ground. It easily lifted the body, and the sound of torn flesh was heard. A few minutes later, the creature left what it was doing and disappeared, as if it had never existed, leaving torn body parts and a severed head on the ground with open, horror-filled eyes. Kira stood up heavily and looked at her torn knee. It pinched painfully, and Kira had to wait until the pain subsided slightly. When it became easier to lean on her bruised leg, she slowly moved towards the statue. Suddenly she heard a scream. "Is this really Rose?" thought Kira. After all, it would be time for her to return. Slowly, timidly, she walked forward, trying her best not to make noise. Her heart was beating wildly in her chest, trying to jump out. When there were a couple of meters left to the statue, Kira saw a vague glow, and when she came closer, she discerned the blue figure of a man, bent over Rose's body. Kira gasped in horror, and the scream got stuck in her throat. Her legs buckled, but she, more mechanically than consciously, held on to the tree. Her gaze was riveted on her friend's body, and on the creature bending over her, greedily devouring something. When she realized what had happened, her body regained its strength and her mind raced. She didn't scream. Turning sharply, Kira rushed back with all her might to the exit. Suddenly she felt someone's presence, and a second later, she was already flying down. Once on the ground, Kira realized the horror of her situation, but it was too late. A heartbreaking scream escaped her throat, and then everything died down. All that remained were trees stained with crimson blood, scattered pieces of flesh, and a crimson mess of entrails on the path. The moon disappeared behind a cloud, leaving the horror of the night in darkness, and deathly silence fell around again.